All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Truman Fritz. I'm the president of the Undergraduate Student Government at USC, and welcome to our webinar on USC's plans for the 2020 fall semester, Project Restart, and return to campus amidst the coronavirus pandemic. For your information, this meeting is being recorded for future reference and watching. And today we are glad and happy to be joined by President Carol Folt, Provost Charles Zukoski, and Vice President for Student Affairs, Winston, as well as my graduate student government counterpart, Melisa, Osborne. So today is the result of a number of different questions that we've been asked, resulting about how students are being consulted and essentially how we're returning to campus in the fall. We're in constant communication with administrators from the USG and GSG side of things, expressing your needs, expressing your interests, and fighting for your views. And there were a number of different questions asked today that we will try to get to both live and through the RCPs. We won't be able to answer everything today, and we might not have all the answers. But that's fine because we have a number of hundreds of different people working on this project as we try to return safely back to USC's campuses.
Hi everyone, my name is Melisa and I am the president for Graduate Student Government. We just wanted to let you know that there are many unknowns. The situation and plans are changing rapidly. We are in the midst of trying to figure out what the future will look like, and we don't have all of the answers today, but we wanted to give students the opportunity to have their voices and questions heard. We also want you to know that senior leadership and USC administration care very much about students and their experience, and both undergraduate and graduate student government are listening, and we are relaying all of your concerns as best we can.
So we have a number of different questions also based on the university's responses and efforts to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive USC. This is obviously a very, very important topic to all of us here. But today we're going to be dedicating a separate forum for that in the coming weeks. Today is going to be specifically regarding Project Restart. Now, there's obviously a little bit more to say before we jump in. I'd like to hand it off to President Carol Folt for any remarks that she has.
Great. Thank you, Truman and Melisa. Thank you so much for coming to us and suggesting that this might be a good forum in which to reach lots of students. I know that probably I've talked with many people. I know Truman and Melisa and Winston and Chip, all of us are spending lots of time in smaller groups where we're having a chance to talk directly to people. And in particular, I just want to thank people because every time I go to one of those groups, sometimes I'll be with a cultural group, sometimes I've been with a number of student athletes, sometimes I'll be with students in different forums and faculty. We're learning something every single time, and we're trying hard to be responsive. I bet you can guess that we get a lot of email, and we are trying really hard to answer every one of them, as fast as we can. And, sometimes those have been incredibly valuable. So don't stop writing them, because when we read it, we sometimes learn something that we just didn't actually understand was a glitch in the system or something that would be really important for all of you. So I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward, really, we learn a lot just from the questions you ask. And even if we don't have the answers for them today, you give us a lot of help by having us understand what's top of mind. So I'm going to just give a few introductory comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Provost Zukoski, Chip, because he's really been the person that's in charge of Restart for us, although we all work together on it. And then he'll also bring it over to Winston, to Vice Crispy, who can talk a lot about all the different student things that we've been doing. And I want to say that we've actually learned a lot, because we've been in this sort of quarantine state actually for a number of weeks now, just as all of you have been. But even during that time, we've had over 1,200 students on campus and researchers coming back, and experiences that I think are really helping us as we try to interpret what we can really do when we move forward in the fall. And we can share some of what we've learned, some of the things that we've seen that we don't think can scale to 47,000 people, and some things that we know will really be able to improve even in the coming weeks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, And then, as you heard from Truman, we're going to do this at another time to talk about all the initiatives that are well underway, that we've even talked about earlier, to address structural and anti-Black racism on campus. That too is a work in progress with lots of your input and a lot of work ahead, but we look forward to having that conversation too. So we start off by telling you why it's such a fluid situation. And I can tell you quite honestly, there is nothing in the world any of us wish more than to have everything back to the way it was right now. That's all we want. That's why we're here. We love it. We want to be with you. We want to be seeing you in the classroom, but we can't. You know, that's just not the situation that we're in. So there's no, we are not in any way encouraged to try to slow that down, but we are absolutely driven by the need to do it as safely as possible and to follow the laws of the region and really understand the health issues. So many of the decisions that we're going to make and will need to make are going to be driven by health. And so if they aren't exactly what we would dream for of the fall, then we're going to do all sorts of other things to continue to really increase our offerings and try to work to make sure that your experience still stays a rich and positive one, and that you can continue your progress towards degree. I think you all read the newspaper and you know that just in the last week, we are seeing a massive surge in the virus. And unfortunately for us, it's surging in major metropolitan areas, including Los Angeles. And of course, the governor just put back in place the mandatory masks. But if you live here, you'll see that people aren't following that. And as a result, that surge, or as one of the things, that surge is increasing. And we know that it's also increasing, it's spreading the way that it actually affects people. It was earlier largely confined to people in very close contact, and there were a lot of travel things, aspects of people's lives that were affecting it. But right now, it's clearly becoming very strongly associated with social practices, not wearing masks, no social distancing, going to bars, hanging out. There is no doubt, you look at Florida right now and you look at Arizona and you really are seeing that. And while younger people seem to have less pronounced effects, there are many younger people that get seriously ill. But of course, that we also know that younger people tend to come in contact with people who are more at risk. So it's increasing. We're also seeing still a steady surge in places like meat packing plants and in nursing homes where people have the same risks they've had, and it's hard, very difficult in those situations. And we're also seeing high risks in low-income communities. So think of it, all of those are especially relevant here at USC. We're in a dense, partially surging area, and we don't see and have not yet seen in California any cap on that increase. It's been a steady increase every single week. So we haven't even come to the max here in LA. And I think the social distancing and masking was actually slowing it. But as that becomes released, we don't know what's going to happen. We also have dorms. People live in residence halls that act a bit like a cruise ship if we're not extremely careful and put in very strong, stringent rules. We give lectures, or we used to, that are akin to being in a crowded movie theater. And if you've looked at movie theaters opening up now, they don't look anything like they used to, so lecture halls can't either. We have many, many events that are at very high density that in our past world that cannot possibly work in the middle of this kind of COVID outbreak. And we have our students, you know, we're a population that is very bimodal. We've got a lot of relatively young students, and we have faculty and work staff that is considerably older. So we face very different risks just for the people that actually all come, work, and live here. And a very large percentage of our students actually live in neighborhoods that are at particularly high risk. And many of our staff and faculty live in homes with extended family, including elderly parents. So if you think about that, nothing is more important to us than trying to have this work, but we have community safety that has to be deeply, deeply, deeply a part of everybody's ethos, because there isn't a single person that could come back here that doesn't have the possibility to affects somebody else. So as we think about what we have to do, we have to ensure that we can keep our own spaces safe as possible. But the difficult thing for us is we can't ensure you're going to do it the second you leave campus. So these are all the things that are going on in our minds as we try to figure out how can we provide what we know we want to do. So I'll tell you what we will do for sure. All sessions will be going, classes will be offered. As we've said from the start, they will all have an online capacity. What we don't know is how many will also have an in-person capacity. That's what we're still trying to figure out. We can tell you there won't be large lectures, there won't be big massive events. So we have to think, what can we do in small groups with spacing? How can that actually work with teachers and staff to also keep them protected? And we are putting in every single thing you could imagine for safety, but no matter what happens, it's going to have to be a much less dense campus, because that's how we can keep it safe. We're already bringing back researchers. We can do a really good job in laboratory spacing people out and doing things, and Chip will tell you more. There's a lot going on there. They're going to come up, I think, to almost 30% capacity. And we can also keep graduate programs going much more easily. Most people in the graduate programs actually live not on campus, and we have other ways of doing that. A lot of them have online components. The hardest thing for us is residential life and large and undergraduate student life and social life. Those are the things that are particularly hard to control, while still wanting to make sure that you have what you need and can have a wonderful opportunity here. We've got hundreds of staff that have been working round the clock to make this and working on decisions. And we're not making the decision too fast, because the faster we make it, the less it's going to have to be a lot more restricted. The truth is, until we really know how to keep people safe and what the patterns are going to be like, it's hard. And because the health situation has continued to deteriorate, it's getting a little tougher for us to project out too far. But our goal is to get you this information as quickly as possible. I know there are international students online too, and I don't know what's going to happen with international travel. As difficult as that is, we have no special understanding of it, but we're trying very hard to get more understanding of that, and we'll keep you fully informed. But what we will do is do our best to make sure that the difficulties of being online because of different time zones are things that we should be able to fix, and we will work every day to make sure that if you're online, that's not going to be a restriction to your academic process and progress, excuse me. You know, I think those are the main things in terms of the general way of approaching fall semester. And you're going to see us slowly roll more people on, and they're coming on with all sorts of safety procedures put in place. And Chip can tell you more. We sent a letter out about that. We'll keep you informed with those. We're going to show you pictures of what it looks like, and so you can get a real feel. But I will say, even something as seemingly simple as wearing a mask, we're not going to compromise on it. So I really say honestly to students, if you feel that you will not be able to follow the rules about mask wearing, then I would urge you not to come back to campus. And I say that being very honest about it, because that is still shown to be, along with washing your hands, the single best way you can protect other people, and maybe the best way that you can protect yourself. So we're going to put in rules that we think are meaningful. We aren't going to put in stupid rules. We're going to put in ones that health people think are important, but we're going to have to enforce them, because the safety of everybody will depend on all of us working together to do it. So my suggestion is make all sorts of really fun masks that you like wearing, and let's make mask a style here, because it's a mask is about caring for other people. It's about as caring for other people as you can be. But those are the kinds of things in the coming weeks we want to talk about, and we'll hopefully in the next coming days, we'll be able to have more information. But that just gives you a flavor. We've had over 1,600 people living on campus all summer, and no one's gotten COVID. So that's something we feel really good, that when people follow the rules and we put in the right procedures, we're really pretty good of taking care of people while they're on campus. We've had amazing, our staff has been phenomenal in what they've done to keep that living safe for people, and we've been doing everything to keep it safe for everybody who works here. But we're at lower numbers compared to what we would be in the fall. That, I think, covers much of it. We're about to enter the second session of classes in early July, and all of the classes have been remote this summer, and we actually have greater enrollment this summer than we have over both sessions last year. I do think, you know, people are sort of taking seriously the idea that if you can keep your progress going, it's a really good thing. To take a year off at this moment is very difficult. And when we all get back in full speed, there are going to be even more people wanting to be in those same classes and in those same positions. So as much as you can keep yourself moving forward, the better. And that's what we'll be trying to do, is make sure you can do it, whether it's in person or online. We want you to have a great experience and keep moving forward. So why don't I turn it over to Chip, and we'll come back for questions in a bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. So I first want to say thank you for joining us. This is an unusual summer. I don't have to tell you that. You're having to live through it as well. But what you need to understand is that the fall is coming. And for academics, this is simply an exciting time. We always look forward to welcoming students back to campus, getting our academic programs up and going. So there's just tremendous excitement. And then this year, we add on top of that the changes that we're facing because of the COVID pandemic. But we're still very excited. We very much want you with us, and we're designing programs that will be engaging, educational, and it's, as the president said, help you move towards your educational aspirations. Now, when we think about coming back in the fall, because of the pandemic, we think first and foremost about the safety of our students, our faculty, and our staff. Every decision that we make is guided by the public health authorities and experts at USC, in the city, in the county, in the nation, and in the world. That we're data-driven, and our decisions are based on what the public health authorities say is going to be best practice, and we follow those policies and practices in the decisions that we're making. There's, as I said, everyone on campus is excited about welcoming you back, and as a result, there's huge amount of activity that's taking place on campus. We don't have all of the solutions yet because the situation remains fluid. The public health authorities are still settling in on what is appropriate for higher ed to undertake and do, but we're making progress, and this is an opportunity for us to tell you where we are and what we're doing. So what is happening? First, we have made a decision. The decision is that we moved up the day that classes start. So we will be in session on August 17th. And we moved it up so that we could be completed by Thanksgiving. So everything, including exams, will be done by Thanksgiving. And the purpose of that was that we didn't, so there will be no fall break. We'll go straight through to Thanksgiving. The purpose of that is so that students don't disperse and then come back, and we think that's a public safety issue that we have to worry about. Secondly, we didn't want students to take exams away from campus. One of the things we learned at the end of this semester was that the online exams, when you're at home environments, can be problematic. And so we're trying to mitigate that by ending the semester before Thanksgiving. So that's the first thing that we're doing. Secondly, we are welcoming a lot of students back to campus, and the thing that we need to emphasize is that while we will have less density on campus, we're reliant on one another to protect ourselves. That this is communally spread, and if we're going to remain safe and actually remain open, then we have to not become a hotspot. And that then it's incumbent on individuals to protect the community so that together we can accomplish what we think is important. So when students come back to campus, faculty, staff, and students come back to campus, first there's a training module. This training module will be required of students, faculty, and staff to come back onto campus. It's on Trojan Learns right now. It's got to be completed before you come back to campus. We're also working on a Trojan commitment that speaks to the fact that we are a community and we have to care for one another, and it requires us to take precautions for ourselves and for the community around us. When we come back to campus, we are going to have face coverings. Face coverings will be required, and these face coverings are used in order to reduce the spread of the virus. Each day, we're going to ask individuals to go through a Trojan check, which essentially does a wellness assessment, where you simply tell, you self-report what your symptoms are. And it has been found from public health authorities that that's been very useful. And when you have symptoms of the flu, we ask you to stay at home and not come to campus. Testing will be available for those who develop flu-like symptoms on campus and that are consistent with COVID-19 or who have been exposed to those who have COVID-19. All students, whether they live on or off campus, who become ill or exposed will be provided with isolation, quarantine, lodging, and assistance. So because the disease is spread by community, we expect that there will be cases on campus. The result will be that we will isolate or quarantine those individuals who have the disease or are exposed, and we will provide assistance and support for all of those who need to go into quarantine or into isolation, whether they live on campus or not in the area. We also know that there are individuals who are in at-risk groups. The definition of at-risk is defined by the CDC, and our Public Health Advisory Policy Committee has come up with our definition, and this is available on the COVID-19 work site. But those that are older, that have comorbidities, whether you're young or old, are at higher risk. And we want to work with you. This is one of the reasons why all of our classes will be offered online, so that students are able to make progress towards their degree. We will also be offering a fair number of in-person classes for those classes where you have to be in person in order to make progress towards your degree, or where we're able to accommodate given space and availability of faculty. In the classrooms on campus, in our activities across campus, we are preparing for the physical distancing that is required. So this is the 6-foot distancing in all classrooms and workspaces. Right? So that reduces the density, the number of individuals that we have in our classes and in our laboratories, and with the result that we are scrambling right now to find places where we can hold our classes, because the numbers of them, the number of students in a classroom has now shrunk substantially. However, when we are in class, there will be robust cleaning protocols and sanitation processes for all public buildings, recreation spaces, and classrooms, again, following the best public health guidelines. We've checked the ventilation and are working on ventilation in all of our indoor spaces to make sure that all of the ventilation is up to snuff and is able to help protect us. The size of gatherings on campus will be limited. These will be set by the public health guidelines around us, but we already know that there will not be large gatherings on campus. And we're working on housing in the residence halls. We know that there will be fewer than the normal number of students in the residence halls, perhaps substantially. And because of this, the public health guidelines and the physical distancing that we have to go through, we don't completely understand those yet. We are working on them. We should have information about that out very soon. But there will be fewer beds available in the dorms on campus because of the physical distancing rules that we have to work with. There's a lot of interest in international students, and we are proud of and want our international students to be with us and be educated, where we will be challenged by that, by the international travel restrictions that are in place. Right now, students coming from another country will be required to quarantine for 14 days before coming to campus. That's a federal rule, but there will be a quarantine before they come to campus. Visas, in order to come to the United States, could take a while to process, so students should start applying now. Again, this is out of our hands. These are federal policies, and the State Department too is recovering from the pandemic and the shutdown that took place. Academic advisors will be here to help during the orientation process, and we're going to work very closely with our international students to ensure that you have a rich experience, whether you're able to come to campus or you aren't able to come to campus, and we'll continue to work with you. And so for the international students, there's a communication with much more detail that will be coming out here very shortly. As I've said, the classes, all classes will be offered online, and a fraction of our classes will be offered in person. The deans, the faculty, and the staff are working very hard to do the scheduling and work out exactly what the protocols are. And again, communications about that will be coming out very soon. The faculty are taking very seriously the lessons that they learned from the final quarter of last year about how to teach well online. And a lot was learned, and we are committing a lot of resources to help the faculty come up to speed so that they can work well in online situations, in hybrid situations where it's partly online or and in person, and then for the in-person with the new physical distancing guidelines that we have to take into account. So a lot of work is going on. On campus, the libraries will be open, but they will be subject to physical distancing limitations. And again, those will be set by the public health authorities as to the number of people that we're able to have in a variety of rooms and the distance that they have to be apart. Again, we're still working out the details on all of that. What's fascinating is that USC offers 9,000 classes in a semester, and we're having to reschedule them. And so this is a rather monumental task that we're going through right now. But we are, and we're very excited that you'll be back and joining us soon. When it comes to research, one of the first groups that we have been bringing back to campus has been our research students. And we started back with a phased approach where plans had to be submitted from individual PIs to their schools, and the schools submitted plans to a central design process. And then I had the authority to say, okay, the plans are in place, they meet our standards, and we can go. For the last 2 weeks, we've been in what's called phase 1, which brings us in a slow way back up to 10% of our normal capacity. And that has gone extraordinarily well with the Trojans Learn module, with Trojan Check. So we are back in space. And just today, we're now ramping up to about 30%. And we will learn in that process about what that means for getting in and out of buildings, in and out of labs, crowding on campus. And so there's a lot of learning that is taking place right now about how to make a smooth entry into the fall when we're coming back. Okay. As you might imagine, COVID-19 has had some large impacts on the finances of the university. And our revenues went down and our costs went up substantially. In order to mitigate these, the shortfall that we've been looking at, the senior leadership all took pay reductions, and the faculty are going to have their retirement contributions reduced starting in January. Merit pauses for faculty and staff were essentially frozen, and we didn't go forward with those. And yet our COVID costs remain high. In order to educate in the way that we're doing, online, hybrid, and in person, our costs are actually higher than they were this time last year. Now, we're committed to a USC quality education, whether it's online or in person, and our online education is superb. Don't kid yourselves. When we say we're going to teach well, we mean it, whether it's online or in person, and we're going to continue to do that as we go forward. So we also will now be setting up soon a web page. It's called Trojan Return, and that web page will begin to contain the information that we can update you on in directions that we're going. So with that is my sort of setup of answering some of the questions that we got ahead of time. I'd now like to hand it over to Vice President Winston Crisp. Winston.
Thank you, Provost Zukoski. And let me just add my greetings to Dr. Folt and the student government officers and the Provost Zukoski. We're happy to be here today. Clearly, there are many questions that you need answered in order for us to make this happen. And we are very engaged in trying to find you those answers. They're not all here today. We're not going to have all the answers today, but I do hope you keep the questions coming, because eventually we're going to have to answer each and every one of them. I also want to say I'm not going to try to repeat the things that Dr. Folt has said or that Dr. Zukoski has said, and I want to focus my initial comments more on how we are preparing and getting ready to actually welcome you back and how we will manage that. It is our desire, as has been said, and it's our strong desire, it's a heartfelt desire, to give you as good a quality experience on this campus and around this campus as is possible for us to do that. But we are absolutely going to have to be doing that differently than we have done in the past. As you are learning already from the comments, we are still trying to clarify exactly what kind of space we're going to be allowed to make use of in the residence halls and otherwise, and those answers are coming. But we are going to continue to try to work hard to make sure that organizations can engage in activities that they have been engaging in, albeit we will have to engage in social distancing. We may have to have small groups linked into bigger groups using our technology, and we're going to have to be creative about it. But I want to start from the top, because all of this is based upon and dependent upon our ability to keep you safe and healthy. Right? And as has been mentioned in a number of times, we are still awaiting and we are still working every day with the state and with the city and the county to clarify what those rules are going to actually be, and you will know them as we know them. But I also want to say very clearly, it is going to take all of us in order to make this work. And we are going to have to demand compliance with the health protocols and the health rules that are set up to engage people's safety, because if we can't keep you safe and if we can't keep you healthy, it all falls apart. Now, having said that, we're going to be working hard within the residence halls, not only to figure out where everybody's going to be placed, but also what are the support services and what are the kinds of activities that we can support within the residence halls. We have to deal with food. We will be feeding the people that we have here on campus, but that is probably going to look different slightly than what you're used to. The days of walking through sort of buffet lines and things like that, we're not going to be able to support. So we are having to continue to think creatively about how to produce good, nutritious food and give you options so that you can be healthy as well. We are going to be engaged in a lot of training around safety and around making sure that you have the tools that you need in order to engage. And we want to make sure that the technology needs that are there to help us do all of this are in place. All of this ultimately comes down to good people working here at the university who want to support you in every way and who are going to want to provide you with as good an experience as we can. So we're going to get to a lot of questions, and we're going to answer the ones that we can, and the ones that we can't answer right now, we're going to be making sure that we get those answers. Communication is going to be important, and as Dr. Zukoski said, we're going to have the Trojan Return site up very shortly, and hopefully as we answer all of the questions that need answering, you'll have access to that information there as well. But what I really want to say in my time before we get to the questions is that we have a vibrant community. We have wonderful, creative students, faculty, and staff, all of whom, if we work together and as we work together, we'll be able to make sure that we have a rich environment for you to live and work in. That is our commitment, and that is what we will continue to work towards. So I'll pause at this moment and allow back to Truman so that we can get to responding to and dealing with some of the questions that you have as best we can.
Thank you, Vice President Christ. Thank you, Provost, and thank you, President Folt. So we do have a number of different questions that we've gotten from students prior to this, and we also have over 100 Q&A live questions as well. So we'll be taking those in tandem, but I want to give a quick overview of the different topics that we have. We have 5 different topics, each around 10 minutes. First, public health and safety. Second, academic quality and research. Third, residential life. Fourth, international students. And fifth, the student experience. So we'll be taking those in tandem, and we'll kind of ask that people who are sending in live questions, please form their questions around each of these individual topics. And then Melissa and I will take turns alternating on each section, taking questions both from the RSVPs as well as live. So to kick it off, let's talk about public health and safety. Obviously, this is going to be a fluid situation, and this is going to be a very different semester in terms of public health. Can you give us an overall vision for life on campus in fall and possibly beyond?
Why don't I try to start?
I'll specify. Yeah, Provost Zukoski.
Oh, yes, Jim. Okay, sorry.
And I can hopefully add some as
you can
well.
all.
So I think on campus, what we're going to find is that there'll be a lower density of people on campus. That when we start in the fall, we will be encouraging those that can work from home to work from home. And that has actually emptied the campus right now, and we expect it to in the fall. There will be fewer students, in part because the dorms will have fewer students in them. Then we expect a lot of students to be taking courses online and be on campus for their in-person classes, not for the online classes. So you'll see a lot fewer students. I expect to not be run over by as many skateboards, just as an example. All right, now then everybody will be masked. There will be these public health guidelines. We will have to check in. We'll have to let people know what our symptoms are. There will be what's called surveillance testing, where there's a fair bit of testing to find out if there are hotspots on campus so that we can catch them. Classes will be different in that we will have to sit farther apart. We'll have to wear masks in classrooms. There will be probably ways you come in and the ways you leave so that we don't get massing of people on campus. So those are sort of the physical outlines. I'm not imagining large gatherings for athletic events or for recreational events, because those bring people together and we can't have that. On the other hand, I am imagining a very vibrant cultural life that Winston can describe more of this, but I know that the faculty and the staff are working very hard to create an atmosphere on campus where there's a tremendous amount of engagement. Certainly, whether it's online or in person, the educational quality that is going to be delivered is going to be at its usual astonishing level, that we have fabulous faculty who design courses for the students. And so I'm imagining the intellectual life of the campus will be different, but will be exceptionally high quality.
What I would add to what Dr. Zukoski is saying is that we're obviously going to have a variety of things available for people. So we're not going to have access to all of the spaces that we have always had. We are probably not going to be able to have gatherings of more than 30 people. So the days where you had Bovard Arena filled with hundreds and hundreds of people for different events, we're not going to be able to do things like that. But we may be able to make use of those spaces in combination with technology, and we're working on programming so that things can still happen live. And once we get to the point where we figure out exactly how many people can be involved live, we can engage in small group activities and different kinds of events like that, and also connect with the technology so that whether you are on campus but unable to participate, or if you're off campus or away from campus, you will still be able to access the life and the events. We're going to have to figure out how to, and we are working on figuring out how to sponsor more chat groups and chat rooms and other online opportunities that can and will connect people on campus. Your life hopefully will be similar in some ways to what it was, in the sense that you'll get up, you'll prepare yourself, you'll go to the classes that you have live, you'll engage in online virtual activities otherwise, and we will have many sort of things set up to try to help you engage that way, because community is going to continue to be perhaps even more important than it has always been given the social distancing and the restrictions. But let me be clear, some of the things that we have been used to in the past, we are not going to be able to deal with. We are not going to be able to have lots of wild parties and undergrad parties out in the immediate surrounding community and be able to tolerate that. We are not going to be able to tolerate those kinds of large gatherings that put us in danger. But the other side of that is we're going to commit everything that we have to provide as many opportunities as we can that people can connect to.
Thank you for that. Provost Zukoski, you mentioned something about a Trojan commitment, and this has been in conversation for a little bit in Project Restart. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that pledge looks like?
The pledge is focused on having students recognize that there are certain collective behaviors that we have to undertake, and asks that the Trojan commitment asks that we commit to respecting our community and therefore follow the public health safety rules that are in place. So that's it's a testament to our understanding and knowledge that we're in a risky environment, and the way we're going to mitigate the risk is by following the best public health guidelines around us. And so it's a Trojan commitment to follow those follow those rules and keep everyone healthy and safe. This will be a big deal, though. I think that following the rules not following the rules must have consequences, because it puts so many people at risk. And so the Trojan commitment is sort of the basis by which we say, you aren't following the rules, you said you'd follow the rules, we can't have that. And so it's a big deal that we have to take very seriously. We're in very different times, and we can't afford, as a community, as individuals, to not follow those rules. And so this is serious stuff, that it isn't something fluffy. The Trojan commitment is a big deal for us all.
Speaking a little bit more about the rules, you mentioned that we will be requiring masks on campus in the fall. Will the university, or is the university planning to provide masks and or personal protective equipment?
Yes, yes, up to some level, and they won't be fashionable. Okay, they'll be functional. And so if you want fashionable face shields, as the president was saying, bring your own, okay, and wash it regularly. But they will be available on campus.
Great. And I think USG and GSG will also be working on providing branded face masks as well, or face coverings.
Truman, I'm sorry. While we are on this question of expectations and what will the experience be like, I also want to point out and make it clear, because we keep mentioning that a lot of what we are trying to do is dependent upon the health situation and the rules coming from LA County. So, for example, I know that everybody is wondering and they want to know specifically about move-in date and things like that. And that information is going to be coming just as quick as we can. But we are still even ascertaining how many beds we are going to have available. So, and I know people want to know what that means. And it may mean that we're not, well, it will mean that we are not going to have the same number of beds available that we have always had. So we have to figure out exactly how many bed spaces we are going to have available based upon the health circumstances, so that we can then know exactly how many people we can put where. So there will be less density. That information is coming, and people are going to have to get used to, I think, the fact that we're going to have to be continuing to do a lot of what we are doing online. The commitment, on the other hand, is that for the community that we end up with here, we're going to be doing everything that we can, both to provide all of those online resources that will be shared with everyone, but at the same time, trying to create those sort of in-live happenings and activities that can enhance that.
Thank you for that. Provost Zukoski, you also mentioned testing procedures and availability for those displaying symptoms and those in contact. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what contact tracing will look like? Are there technologies being built, or is there a plan and process for that right now?
No, I can't answer all of that. There's a huge amount of effort going into understanding exactly how we'll track the use of, for example, the Google or the iPhone app, that sort of things. We are, of course, looking at that. We're concerned about security and privacy concerns of the individuals involved, but the groups that are worried about contact tracing are studying all of those options, and we'll be making available soon exactly how we're going to contact trace. At a minimum, it'll be the good old-fashioned way, person by person. But we are looking for ways of scaling that so that it can be done more effectively and more rapidly.
Thank you. In consideration with the university's definition of at-risk, if you're a high-risk student, and this is coming in live, if you're a high-risk student or are a student caring for a high-risk family member, will there be an option to take classes exclusively online? And if so, will students have to apply for DSP accommodation to take classes exclusively online?
Now, this is why we have set it up so that all classes will be available online. Now, when I say all classes, there's a little bit of a nuance there in that if you're in the clinical care area and part of the course requires you to do person-to-person, those have to be done person-to-person, okay? So those that are required to be person-to-person, we expect to be offering those which we can and plan for those going into the future. But the vast classes will be offered online. You won't have to apply to take them exclusively online, and that is there to protect the student and the student's family.
I will add.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please, Dr. Folt, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I think it's important that we be really clear about that. I think that for many students, online is the right thing to do this next term. Because remember, we're trying to deal with the situation now, but there are many people who would be projecting that there's going to be a surge in the middle of the term too. So my goal is to make sure that the online offerings are as good as they possibly can be, because I think for some people, for some families, that's by far the best opportunity. And, in spite of the difficulty, it's still really, a college education is still really important for people. And I want people to understand that this is, we're trying to make sure that it can be as rich as possible for you. We're giving all the financial aid we've ever given before. So for some people, that financial aid may be that you live at home and your tuition is covered. That's going to be there. But please, please, please realize that that may be by far the best decision for many of our students. And our goal is, if that's the case this time and we're ready to be back full speed in the winter, then that's when you might decide you want to come. I know that we need to let people know as much as we can as soon as possible, because you have leases that might need to be decided by July 1st. So the size of the residential housing number of beds has to be decided for you by that time. And we know that that's a constraint. So we're working on being able to give you that information. Unfortunately, these have been changing at the county level too. At one point we might have thought we could have 2 people per room, but we're really thinking the only people that we can have to be 1 person per room. So that does really limit the number of on-house beds that we have, but that is staying in keeping with the guidelines that we see. So thinking about being at home and connecting in many ways as possible is not, I hope that people can find their way to being excited about that, because I think it might be the best option for people, for some people.
And I will add, just on that last specific question, students who have particular vulnerabilities or work with the Office of Disability Services will continue to do that. It's not going to be required to apply just to be fully online, if that's not true for every other student. But that office will be fully open. That office will be doing everything that it has always done in terms of supporting students to make sure that we accommodate everything that needs to be accommodated that we can.
Great.
While I'm on that subject, Truman, it makes sense for me just to also say, and this is really important, because we all know that this is high stress, high anxiety sort of environment that we are in. And I do want everybody to understand that wellness and mental health is of the utmost importance, just like safety. And we are preparing to deal with that as best we can. We are increasing resources. We are going to be embedding resources in different places so that they can be closer to our students. We are increasing the sort of Let's Talk and online opportunities, but also want everybody to know that campus health is going to be open. And we will be seeing students just like we always have, and are trying to increase and are increasing those resources. We know that this is a difficult time. People's worlds are changing, and our ability to handle all of this is reliant upon our resiliency and our mental health. And so we are putting everything that we can think into making sure that those resources are as robust as they can be.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think well-being is an incredibly important and essential aspect of how we're all kind of coming together, especially from the student affairs side of things. So thank you for bringing that up. I also wanted to ask for a little bit more clarification about how are we working with our community organizations and the city of Los Angeles in these public health manners, and what does that partnership look like?
So I'd love to answer some of that, Truman. I think this has been something that USC has really been very active in. And some of it has involved a lot of students who have been here, who have been doing a lot of this. But a lot of what we've been doing focuses first on helping people get food. I think we've delivered tons of food. And in a number of cases, we're still feeding 2 meals a day to local neighbors. Some of them are the families of kids that are in some of our preschools and our other programs. We've taken on the families. A lot of them are elderly people that live close by us. We're working very closely with all our local representatives. And it isn't just at this campus, it's very deeply involved over at the HSC campus. And so that's been a big part of it. A lot of help has been trying to do where there's testing needed. We've been doing some of the earliest research on trying to understand the background levels of exposure that really started exposing the higher rates in low income and neighborhoods of color, came out of our researchers who were going out and trying to do research into local neighborhoods to understand what the exposure is. So that's been really important. I think we've just been also trying to find ways to keep our educational programs going. So we have 5 high schools that are right deeply involved in each of our neighborhoods. We also have the NAI, our neighborhood initiative. It actually graduated the greatest number that it's ever had in its history this year. All 100% of the students are going to go to university, and almost half are coming to USC. But one of our donors, because we couldn't raise any money for it this year, jumped in and paid all their fees and made sure that that could continue. So we've got very generous people doing that. They've been fueling the emergency funding, but there is a whole neighborhood emergency. So we have those 4 funds, students, we have for staff, we had it for, one of the funds is also for neighbors. So, I could go on, and there are many, many ways. Small business owners have been getting something like 3,000 of them have getting support through our business school, so they can try to recover funding. The last thing I'll say is that we did take the money, our $19 million we got from the CARES grant. We've given out $9 million. All of it will go to students, but there is some possibility that some of the remaining, because it just wasn't claimed yet, can possibly help people in the fall too. So we're going to continue to reach out to you that might have needs that fall within the coverage of that CARES Act money. And then in the neighborhoods, we've been helping a lot of people in the neighborhoods and in local organizations be able to access their own help through government federal dollars. So those are just some of the ways, but it's pretty comprehensive, and that doesn't even talk about all the healthcare ways. They run the street clinics, they're out doing all those things. They've been running free dental clinics throughout the very worst of COVID. Really, the doctors themselves really needing to be very careful, because dental problems, and especially for people who might be homeless, they're excruciatingly painful, and they didn't want to leave people without care in the midst of all this. So, the stories are quite wonderful, and they involve our graduate students, our undergraduates, our staff, and our faculty, and I think we're really proud of them.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear about. Could you possibly elaborate a little bit more about how we're working with our community, specifically regarding public health, and making sure that not only are students aware of how we're impacting the community, but also vice versa, if that's possible?
You know, I think you're raising something that we need to do more of. You know, I think we're really good on campus talking about it. And I think out in the neighborhoods where we're helping people, we're doing well. I don't know that students are quite as aware of how their behaviors really do affect neighbors. And I think I get it. You know, I remember when I thought I was invincible, haven't thought that for quite a while, but you know, and we miss our friends, but we do know that there are parties happening right now around campus. And I will tell you, our neighbors, I think by and large, love being by USC, and they love it because they actually really enjoy students. I mean, I don't think that is the problem, but I think they are very disturbed by what they see are parties without masks, large groups of people, because their health is really at risk. So I think we're going to have to do a better job when we come back, because there may be people that are living and are USC students who really don't even have classes except for online classes, who still live there, and the temptation to continue your social lives that people are used to might be really great. And so we're going to have to work hard, and we're going to need you to help us, because you all care about neighbors individually, but collectively we don't always show it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you all kind of brought up how we want to maintain the superb educational quality that we have. Melisa, if you want to take on academic quality and research.
Thanks, Truman. So we have a number of questions about tuition, the raising and possible reimbursements or reduction of tuition. Can you inform us more about these finances?
Sure. Right now, the education coming to USC from students doesn't cover the cost of the education that we have. The cost of the education has gone up due to COVID. So the online programs that we have are of USC quality, and we're very proud of them. And we think that the tuition reflects the quality of the programs that we have. That's sort of how I think about tuition. We are facing higher costs, and that is driving a gap between our income and our expenditure. And that's why I mentioned in my introductory remarks that we are taking enormous steps in order to, in order to keep the university operating smoothly and mitigate the impacts it might have on employment across campus right now.
Thank you for that. Do you know if there will be any tuition or fee reimbursements?
No, I'm not expecting any tuition or fee reimbursements.
Okay, thank you. Regarding degree requirements, what considerations are being made for in-person or hands-on hours?
So a great deal of thought is going into that on how do we get our students to move towards their degrees in a timely way. Many programs require in-person courses. This is particularly true, let's say, at the clinical level, at the graduate level, and residency level, that sort of things. And one of the first groups that we actually brought back to campus were students needing to go through their clinical rotations in all of our sort of health sciences schools. And those went through very rigorous preparation on how are we going to do it and how are we going to do it safely. So this is top of mind for all of our programs, and we are working very hard to ensure that we can offer the in-person experiences as needed to make progress for degree in a way that is safe and can be done correctly. And that's why I tried to emphasize that we will be offering some in-person courses this fall, in order with the priority being those that must be held in order for the individual the student to make progress towards their degree. So a lot of thought is going into it, and we're expecting to be able to offer most of those in-person, required in-person courses.
Thank you for sharing that. Regarding in-person classes, what additional considerations are being made for TAs? Can TAs choose to be online or in person?
I expect that to be the case, that there won't be, that whatever the rules are for the faculty will be applied to the TAs. And so we have to go through exactly what all of those rules are, but that, yes, I'm anticipating that they will all play by the same rules.
I was going to say one thing, Melisa, about that, because I think that's true. We really do believe that you work with people to do what is can be worked, what they can feel comfortable doing. But I will tell you this, I'm actually pretty convinced I can keep the classroom extremely safe. I'm not worried about that. We've got cleaning protocols, we've got every single thing you can possible. We're going to safe distance people. People are going to be wearing masks. And I think it's not the in-class or even the in-building experience, if we social distance and put our pieces in place, that is actually going to be where people are probably at risk. It is more going to be in the places where we have less immediate control. It could be possibly riding a bus. You know, it could be walking across campus for people that aren't wearing masks. It could be in the daily life people have outside of USC, because we don't know what people are doing. Are they going to get their hair done? Are they going to the bowling alley? I mean, you don't know those things. But I do know that whatever we do, we're going to do every single thing possible for whatever many classes and points of touch in our buildings. We're going to make those as safe as we possibly can. And then we have to work with people for what is going to be important and right for them.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a number of students who are concerned about delayed degree progress. What will happen to PhD students or professional students facing that?
So I think it'll depend on the nature of the delay. So let me just give you an example. There are students in some of the clinical programs where the public health rules simply are that they can't see the patients. That will delay progress towards degree. And as soon as the public health rules allow us to come back, they can go through and get their in-person sorts of experiences. PhD students, many of them have been delayed, and we are expecting that there will be extensions of their stipends in some way to enable them to move forward. The exact ways that's going to happen aren't exactly clear to us yet. We're still working on exactly what the process is by which we would work with students. But our expectation, our goal is that all students are going to make progress towards the degree. I mean, this is what we're all about, is educating the next generation of professionals and leaders for the world. And so we're all about getting students out the door and giving them the experiences that they need and providing them the support that we can so that they can be successful.
I mean, I was just at a wonderful thing where we had all the AAU presidents together, and that's interesting too, because it's interesting to hear what colleagues at other schools are going through. And I will say, especially those that are on the West Coast, they sound pretty much like we do right now. They're under similar health constraints. They're state with a lot of, especially the ones in California, but all up and down the coast. Similarly, you might have seen things like MIT, Harvard, the Ivies. We look very similar in what we're trying to do. But all of us are also imagining, we're hoping that by the winter, but especially by next summer, we're going to be really out from under this. And I got to tell you, we're going to use that summer like we've probably never used it before too. It gives us an opportunity. I mean, you can't always make up PhD work that fast. It's on a time schedule. But for many programs, if we decide to really accelerate or change and broaden the offerings in the summer, we may be working with people to get some of those things, because we really don't want people to lose progress. So we'll use that summer term very actively next year.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We have a number of live questions. I want to make sure that we have time to talk on the other topics. So the last question, has there been any consideration for grading options for the fall? Will opting to take classes pass-fail still be an option?
A great deal of conversation has gone into what the grading options will be, and the considered opinion of the faculty right now is that the grading options will remain the standard ones, just ABC, not the pass-fail sorts of things right now. And
Well,
this is to actually it's for the good of the student to do this. That what the disruption that we all felt in the spring was simply enormous, and you know, without choice and everybody moving around and scattering and that sort of things. And I think the fact that people will know, students will know the courses that they're taking and be choosing and being able to set up the circumstances in a better way, that the need to sort of mitigate the circumstances aren't as strong for the fall. And that's that's what goes into the consideration of the faculty when they're considering it.
Thank you. Truman, I think we should move on to residential life if you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. We've gotten a number of different questions about the residential experience, residential life. What does the residential experience look like next semester?
So let me say this. I mean, and I'm looking also at the chat, and there are lots and lots and lots and lots of questions, very specific questions about exactly what the residential life is going to look like. Like, will you have to wear masks in your room? I don't think so, right? Will you have to wear masks when you're out of your room? Yes, right? Will we have less density? You heard Dr. Folt, and we've already talked about that we still are trying to figure out that we may have single rooms and things like that. So we're still answering some of those questions, and we know the urgency of it. And those answers are going to come just as quickly as we can give them. But it's going to be a different experience. It's not going to look like on campus like what people are used to when we have a community of 80,000, 70,000 people running around in and out of campus. There will be protocols that have to be followed. There will be different ways that you have to go get your food, for example. So large gatherings in the cafeteria are not going to happen. We are still working out sort of the details of all of that. But what the real issue for us and the real challenge for us is, how do we, first of all, understand very clearly what the requirements are going to be health-wise in terms of social distancing, in terms of behaviors. And then we have to figure out within that, what are all of the things that we can do to enhance. So for example, people are going to want to know about the fields and the open spaces that we have, where people are used to running around and playing Frisbee and walking dogs and doing all of those kinds of things. Well, we have every intention to try to have those areas open and available, but they're going to have to be monitored in some way, and we're going to have to enforce social distancing. So one of the things that I want everybody to understand before they come back, this is also why we're going to be doing the training online, and as soon as it's ready, we'll push it out to people, that people really have to understand the quality of our of this level of what you're talking about is going to be heavily dependent upon people doing their part to keep the environment safe. Because if that's not happening, then more and more restrictive type things are going to happen. So I do expect that the life for a student that's on campus will be somewhat of a mix between what they're probably experiencing these days with the sort of stay-at-home things and the ability to engage in a lot of different, mostly small level activities that will try to connect in lots of ways so that they become bigger virtually. But a lot of those very specific questions are coming, answers are coming.
Do you know to what extent Res Ed or the university is working with third-party housing companies and off-campus housing? And could you elaborate on that?
Sure, and thank you for that question, because, you know, as everybody knows, we have as many people off campus in the surrounding areas as we do on campus, and we have a lot of different kinds of living arrangements. They're from the big, sort of somewhat like our residence halls, but private, like your Gateways and Lorenzo and places like that. And then there are lots of smaller sort of landlords, but we have been in contact all throughout this summer, and in fact, since the spring started, with all of these landlords, and we have been connecting with them. We've been providing them all of the information that we provide to our own students. We've provided them opportunities to understand how the local laws are working. We have recently been advocating on students' behalf with those landlords about making sure that there's flexibility in leasing and things like that, because we do get that these things have to happen, and yet we have to have the answers that we need. So we are working hard with all of these local businesses and local landlords to make sure that they have all of the same information that we have, and to the extent that we can also help them with resources and advice and things like that, we're working with them as well.
All right, thank you for that. And then, of course, one of the big questions that we've had come up is, are guests going to be allowed in dorms? And if not, why not? So
let me be clear about this. I think the answer to that is almost certainly going to have to be no.
No.
Right? I'm pretty clear on that. Now, the health requirements may change as we go along, but I don't see them getting any better. If you imagine that what we're doing when we're talking about having to deal with these public health rules and how many people can even live in spaces, it is about controlling the access and the exposure. And everything that we are doing to sort of keep the environment safe is that much more difficult, if not impossible, if all of a sudden we open the doors and people are coming in and out that we don't have any control over. So the direct answer to that is almost certainly going to be no.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, I want to be mindful of time, and we have 2 more sections to get through. Melissa, do you want to take international students?
Sure, thank you, Chairman. All 3 of you, I think, touched upon the complexities and what we're waiting on in terms of international policies regarding international students. There's a number of questions, and unfortunately we won't be able to get through them all. Where can students go for individual support if they have questions regarding visas and travel restrictions and their ability to return to campus?
The Office of International Services is within Student Affairs, but the OIS office that most should be familiar with is doing all that we can to provide that information and help. And Anthony Bailey, Dean Anthony Bailey, is also engaged very much with answering those questions and making sure. Now, let me also be clear, we're going to be pushing this information out as we have it, and we'll continue to push the information out so that people can have it. But for those questions, most directly, it's the Office of International Services.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little more about what USC is doing to partner with other universities across the US to help advocate for our international students?
I'm happy to talk about that. We've been very active working against OPT with personal calls all the way pretty high up in Washington to being part of AAU, APLU, the research universities, Pac-12. We've all been lobbying, and that includes writing the large letters that have gone forward. It also includes working and calling individually. I just saw in the paper as we were speaking that the president is going to issue an executive order today. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's it might not be bad news for universities, but we've been really concerned about it and hopeful that the visa for universities will be exempted. I mean, I'm worried about it all, but I think that in particular is something we'll be finding out. That is going to really help us. Once we have a clearer idea there, I think we're going to be able to get out to our international students much faster. And we feel terrible that we aren't able to answer all these questions for everybody. It isn't from lack of desire. It really is from wanting not to give you information that we then have to undo. But that, I think having a clearer idea there will be able to help us, and I think it's coming soon. There isn't a university, and especially your big research universities, that has not been lobbying hard to get back visa being processed. but there may be travel restrictions and visa processing that does still slow it down. And we will need to consider this when we have people do quarantining. So I think part of the thought in the housing, by the way, is we need to keep some of the housing completely empty. I don't think anyone mentioned this, but some of that housing has to stay empty because if anyone gets sick while they're here, we want to provide people a place to quarantine. And so what schools are doing and what we're being asked to do is keep some significant fraction of our beds empty. But we're going to have to help international students find a place to quarantine if the 2-week quarantine is in place. But none of that is really known yet. But we'll get you that as quickly as we can.
Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate all that you're doing for us, the students. This might be a good opportunity to switch to student experience. Truman?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, we have, obviously, student experience is a broad thing, and we've been trying to kind of nail down what that really looks like in a number of different facets in the conversations that we've already had. I want to start first with well-being. We had a live question come in that was about how are we supporting students' mental health and well-being for those who won't be inside of California due to the current restrictions that we have on telehealth services?
Sure, and thank you. What that question really is about is that the clinical delivery of mental health and other medical services are licensed statewide. So you get a license to practice medicine state by state. It's not a federal sort of license. So even telehealth, so for example, telehealth clinical appointments are also licensed by the state. So if we have a bunch of doctors that are licensed in the state of California, they are not able to provide clinical health to people outside of the state of California, right? We have, what we are doing is working through insurance forms. We are building sort of resource lists for those students who are going to be outside. If you're on our insurance plan, you'll have access. But within your own insurance plan, if you don't, we are also working on lists of resources and making sure that we get students connected. Now, beyond the just pure application of clinical, we are also trying to expand and create more and more opportunities for group conversations and for sharing of information and for chats and the things called Let's Talk. We're continuing to work through and getting ready to sort of work out the Ask Ari app that will help with this. So we're trying to provide as many resources to people and put them in one place so that people can go to a website and find all of those access to things. And then we continue to work in the government setups to try to figure out how we can best navigate these rules. But the bottom line is in addition, that may include creating other relationships with practitioners that are outside of the state that can do some more of these things. So it's complicated, but it is as high a priority as we have. We know that this period of COVID is increasing isolation, not reducing it, and that increases the need for these kind of exercises. Now, we don't have a solution that will be everybody's back here the way we were, so we're having to continue to be creative. I hope I'm getting to what you're asking.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're aware of the way that we're building out non-clinical support. So that really helps to kind of consolidate that. Can you talk a little bit more about potential special support for new students, incoming students, or transfer students in those kind of different buckets?
Sure. Well, parallel to all of this COVID stuff, as you know, we have already been working on plans to sort of change and to create better spaces within the union building to create better resources and services and places for people to access them. That work continues to go on, and that we expect to have the first phase of those improvements done in time for the fall. But that includes more enhanced programming. We're actually opening a first generation center in the union that will allow for resources and services like that to happen there. So we're expanding those resources as we can, creating those better spaces, and all of that has to be connected into the technology so that everyone can enjoy and have access to what we're doing, whether they're in person or online.
Thank you. We also have probably more than a dozen questions about how extracurriculars are going to work, whether that's student organizations, fraternities, sororities, professional organizations. Could you give us an example, or not an example, some insight into how those are going to operate next semester?
Yeah, sure. To the extent that I know the answer, yes, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, we're going to have considerations of space to deal with. So, student organizations' ability to be here and to gather in groups that they do will be restricted in some ways. And this is what I mean when I say we are cataloging and we are trying to figure out where all the available spaces are going to be. We're going to be working through campus activities with every recognized student organization. We're going to do more virtual fairs and things like that to provide people access with it. All of this, I have to say, including what I was just saying about what we're trying to expand within the union, that will hopefully help with not only our multicultural groups, but groups like veterans, groups like our First Generation Plus. I have to give tremendous shout out to Dr. Folt, who has really been a driving force behind this particular project and has even gone out and found us grant money in order to enhance programming for first generation students as well. And so we have the benefit right now of that to help drive things. But we just don't know. We have all of our Res Life staff, all of our campus activity staff, our career services staff, all of our staff is working right now, and we are creating plans and are creating proposals and are creating programming that hopefully will enhance things. It's just going to have to look different, and we're going to push that information as quickly as we can.
This is one thing where living in Southern California is pretty nice, because people can actually sit spaced outside in ways that they couldn't do in other places I have lived in the fall. So, and I do think that's going to be, I'm sure that that's what Winston's team will be working with people. And even if you're spaced outside, you can still have really good interactions, I think, with each other. That's what we'd be hoping.
And we're also looking at technology, and I don't, it's always, you don't want to get too far ahead, because as Dr. Folt said, I don't want to promise things today and then turn out that we couldn't get it or couldn't pull it off. But even things like our outside spaces and looking how we can use technology to enhance that. For example, can we set up movie screens and have movies and things like that that make use of space so that we can have appropriate spacing and different things like that. We're trying to be as creative as we can about how we support. Remember, we have in any given semester, you know this as well as I do, 1,000 recognized student organizations. So it's going to have to be somewhat different, and we're going to have to do things on smaller scale. And in the bigger scale, I continue to hope will be part of our connectivity through our virtual resources as well.
Thank you for that. And then we also had some questions about the CARES Act funding and student basic needs. Could you elaborate a little bit more about why not all of the CARES Act funding has been distributed and how we kind of have that leftover portion?
I mean, I think what we could say is that we've actually met every single request we got properly. Mm-hmm. You know, there are people excluded from the CARES Act funding, as you know.
Right.
So I think that has been part of the problem, and we're continuing to reach out. I mean, and also we've had additional funding, but you know, giving out close to almost $10 million is a lot of money. So it's not like that hasn't gone out. It's been pretty good support for individuals. And I think part of that is just it was maybe assumed we'd still be giving it out. I guess my point wasn't that we didn't think we were going to give it all out. It's just that we still do have some that we will continue to distribute. I know that there's need that will continue.
And to be clear, Truman, I also want to be clear that when we're talking about CARES Act, we're talking about a specific pot of money for specific that have eligibility requirements, right? So when we say the Student Basic Needs Fund, and when we're talking about student emergency funding, CARES Act is one piece of that, right? So as we identify need in our students, we try to evaluate, is the CARES Act money available in this particular situation, can the CARES Act money then be applied to help in those situations? And when it can, it has been. That's in addition to the other CARES Act sort of give out the money sort of regulations. But then we have lots and lots of students and lots of situations that don't fall right within what the CARES Act can do. And that's where the Student Basic Needs Fund and the other funds that we have are coming into place to sort of fill those gaps. That need is going to continue. There's no question that those needs are going to continue. And we are spending, and I am spending frankly, we're all spending quite a bit of time trying to make sure that we continue to have funding in the Student Basic Needs Fund and the wherewithal to help our students as much as we can. And that will absolutely have to continue as we move forward.
We are working at the federal level to try to get more flexibility. I mean, I think that's, again, another one of the things that the universities are banding together, but our people are particularly trying so that it could be extended, and we'd love to see that happen.
That's great to hear. I want to be mindful of time. We are 4 minutes out. So while there are, still 100 plus unanswered questions, we recognize that we weren't going to get to everything today. I guess I'll ask you all for if you have any concluding remarks, things you want to leave our students with.
Maybe we'll do this in reverse order than we do in the beginning. I would just say, I do get, I'm looking at my screen, there's almost 500 questions that have been posted just in this session, and they're all specific, and many of them are all specific. And, as was mentioned in the beginning, we don't have every answer right now that everybody needs, but we are continuing to work hard to do that. There's definitely going to be differences, and we're not going to be as dense. We're not going to have the same space. We're not going to have the same room and adherence. And I have to keep saying this, and I don't want to sound like sort of the bad guy, but adherence to the rules and adherence and a willingness to understand that for us all to be safe and for us all to move forward together and for us all to advance this, everybody's going to have to step up and do their part and understand that it's not just about them, it's about the community around them. And so we're going to have to be very clear about what those requirements are. We are going to have to be very clear about what the enforcements are going to be about that. We understand that, and that information is coming. But I would reiterate something that Dr. Folt said, is that if you're not going to be not just capable of, but ready and willing to really engage at a different level that is about keeping our entire environment safe, then you probably ought to be amongst the group that stays home because ultimately it won't help us otherwise. But having said all that, I do want to say that we are excited about doing all that we can to bring the people back that we can and to provide as great an experience, whether you're online, at home, or hybrid as we can as we move into the fall. And we have to continue to work together to do it. And we will push information to you just as fast and specifically as we can.
So I'd like to just comment that we're in an unprecedented state right now. This pandemic has upended all of our lives, many of our traditions and directions where we thought we were going with our careers and with our education. And I want to emphasize that getting an education and getting a USC education is a path to a good life. It's a great education that enables you to do much. And therefore, whether it's in person or online, we have to recognize that where we are in our circumstances here in Southern California at USC and around the world, and recognize the value of continuing to be educated. And I agree with everything that's been said about being at risk or being concerned about following the rules. Things have changed in a fundamental way, and we need to be cognizant of it. And the excitement that we're feeling about having people come back, that's the beginning of the semester, whether it's online or whether it's in person. And we are working hard to provide engaging activities both in person and online. And I again, encourage all of you to pay attention to the various websites that we are setting up into the communications that we're pulling together. We expect them to start the decisions, our ability to make decisions to start sort of coming very rapidly as we move into the future. And so watch this site. There's going to be a lot of information coming forward. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. I want to say one thing because I know people were asking about the arts. And I do think that each discipline's different, but for example, we're getting pretty good at bringing graduate students back into laboratories. I think there are some of the arts will be much like studio work, will be much like the laboratories. I mean, they're each going to have their own nature. If you're in individual arts where you work in your own space and you can keep it separate, that's going to be a lot easier than if you're a performance dancer. That's going to be more like what it's like to be a football player or a soccer player. So we have lots of different categories that we're dealing with in separate and different ways. So that's something that will come down almost school by school, but there's going to be information out about that. So I just wanted people to know. I guess the last thing that what I want to say is that it's really, we're in the middle of all this, but it's really what we're talking about is one term in your life. It started a term ago for some of you. For some, it's one term. It might be more, but there is a very long aspect of your educational arc and your trajectory that you're going to be developing. And I think that there are things that you can do during this time that might be things that you would not have tried before. I think there may be online experiences that you would never take had you been on campus and doing other things. And I'm really urging people to think about that. Maybe you'll do creative writing, or maybe you'll do something that's in a field you hadn't thought about because you have a very different environment. So I do think you need to try to put your mindset a little bit on the opportunities that are offered. Another thing that I'd say is that it is a chance for each one of us to be the citizen we want to be. I'm sure every person in their heart believes that they care about their neighbors. We've been out, you've been out protesting in the streets for equality. Some of the safety we're talking about is living your life in service of other human beings. And that's another test for us. It's an opportunity, can we actually make choices for ourselves that might not be as much fun as we might have wanted, but knowing that because of the choices we're making, we're protecting others. In addition, if you are back on campus, there are going to be so many opportunities to be volunteering in the communities that we serve and on our campus. Lots of opportunities because we are out there, we're doing things to really help local neighborhoods. And so if some of your on-campus activities weren't going, you may find other things that are deeply personally moving and are of real value for your development. And I think that there's going to be that too. So in the midst of all the confusion and the chaos, which I know people feel, and just the lack of certainty, there are lots of things that might happen that a year from now, you might look back and go, I never thought it, but that was the thing that changed me. And I'm hoping to find lots of those experiences for you too. But Truman and Melisa, thank you so much for doing it. We're all so, we wish we could see you in person, by the way. It's really not as much fun just talking to ourselves on a Zoom screen, but we're imagining all of you and thinking about you every day. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our students for coming. Thank you to our panelists, especially for walking us through some of the nuances and complexities of returning back to campus. This webinar was recorded and we will be sharing it with students as soon as possible.
And just reminding everyone who came today, as always, USG and GSG are here to listen to each and every one of you. If there were concerns, questions, comments, ideas, feedback that we did not get to, please feel free to share it with us at USGPres, PRES at usc.edu, or GSGPRES at usc.edu, GSGPres and USGPres. We are here to listen to you, and we are here to serve you. So thank you everyone again for coming. This is a fantastic event, and we look forward to answering many more of these questions in the weeks and months to come. Fight on.